Great, thanks very much. Thanks again to everyone for being here today. I'm excited about this webinar and I hope you'll enjoy it. Today, we're going to look at the 5 principles of digital transformation success, specifically with a view to the life science manufacturing industry. So it will be a panel discussion. We'll have a brief introduction and I'll just start by introducing who we are as Tangent, as the hosts of the webinar today. So Tangent is an independent self-funded unit within Trinity College, and we deliver accredited and non-accredited programs. We deliver postgraduate certificates that are funded through Springboard, and we also deliver highly specialised masterclasses with a specific industry focus to different partners within different industries in Ireland. So our involvement in the industries and our involvement with startups through a lot of accelerator programs that we do give us a specific insight into the needs of the changing landscape of employment in Ireland today. So that is why we introduced the program, the suite of offerings to do with digital life sciences, digital transformation and this one is in life sciences manufacturing specifically. So today's webinar is to do with, sorry, 1 second. Thank you. Go. Today's webinar is going to focus on 5 principles that bring about success in digital transformation. And we'll have industry experts from the life sciences manufacturing. But we'll also, Tangent also has a suite of offerings that are coming up, such as a program specifically looking at digital transformation in life sciences manufacturing. And this will be coming on board from October. So you can get more information on that program if you look up digital transformation and Tangent, if you Google it, and I'll have a link for you as well at the end of the webinar. So today's panel is a fantastic panel, and I'm really excited to hear their discussion on what brings about success for digital transformation. We've got Tommy Fanning from the IDA, Ray Cahill, who's the VP of Change Healthcare and also the Chair of IMSTA. We've got Dervla Kennedy, the Managing Director of Stratadep, and we've got Barry Curry, consultant with so many years of project management experience specific to digital transformation. So today we're going to have a brief introduction from Tommy, who's going to set about introducing digital transformation and the importance of it in the landscape of life sciences manufacturing. And then we're going to discuss the 5 principles with our panel, which will be people first, a business transformation, the full value chain, plan activation, and incremental over radical. So these are the 5 principles that we'll discuss. We'll have Q&A at the end, but certainly if you've got any questions that pop into your head specific to the principle that we're discussing, feel free to put them in the Q&A box. If you don't have a Q&A box visible on your screen, there's an option at the bottom of your screen next to participants, and that says Q&A, and you should be able to navigate to that and pop your question in there. If you've any issue, you can just put it in the chat as well, and we can pass it to the panel. So without further ado, thank you very much, and I'll pass to you, Tommy, and you can give us your introduction. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks very much, Rachel. Just to say, as a starting point, I'm actually really looking forward to this discussion as well, because I think I'm going to learn a lot from it, from the likes of Ray and Barry and Dervla. So from my point of view, my responsibilities within IDA are for the biopharma sector, but we have a larger life sciences sector today, which includes medical technologies. So if we take those 2 pieces, whole employs about 65,000 plus people directly in Ireland today, not to mention all the other subcontractors and other jobs that are created around it. If we look at the situation we're in today and the virus that has been around now since March or even earlier, the companies that have been most resilient in that have been the life sciences companies. So if we look at obviously the likes of the retail sector, the catering sector, the hotel sector, the tourism sector, all of whom have been hit really, really hard. But if I look at the companies in the biopharma sector today, they've done really well. And their only issues and questions for me have been around, how can I continue to do what I've been doing? How can I continue to expand what I've been doing? And that includes digital transformation. So we have companies out there right now with critical paths around construction projects. And these are the new next generation manufacturing sites, really important manufacturing sites for Ireland. They've hired the people, but getting those people trained up right now. And these will be state-of-the-art digital sites that will have no paper lying around anywhere, that will be very much transformational in nature, will be providing lots of data, and they're going to need the skills to do that, just very simply. So if we think about that success for Ireland in its broadest sense, and I talk about FDI, foreign direct investment, a lot of that has been around technology, has been around science. 1 in 4 people who come out with a degree in Ireland today come out with one in STEM. So therefore, it's very, very relevant to what we're doing and what we're doing in life sciences. So what I'm seeing across the companies, and particularly the biopharma companies today, is this idea of digital and data and digital transformation of existing sites and looking at new projects around that all the time. They talk about this context, and maybe some of you at our webinar today already in the middle of all this, the idea of the Lighthouse Project, whereby they're coming up with new R&D projects that are not just for the Irish site, but are for their global networks. And they're using Ireland because the skills are here. Just very simply that, they're using Ireland because the skills are here. We're also starting to see this great idea of cross-fertilization between the tech sector and the life sciences sector. So again, data analytics, digitization, AI, all those skills that we need that today might be in Google, could be tomorrow in Pfizer. So as I say, they're the type of things we'll be talking about. And as Rachel started out with, it's an area that is definitely a growth area. It's an area that's a great opportunity. And after I finish with one last thing, for your kids, if they're thinking about doing some course of study at college, definitely the digital and the data area has a future, that's for sure. So with that, I'll hand back to Rachel for now, and I'm sure I'll have a few things to say as I listen to the other guys as well. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Tommy. That's great. I suppose we'll take the first principle, though, and that is people first. So the importance about a people first approach is being, human and customer centric in all of our strategies. And I suppose it's fair to say that organizations that ignore how critical people, customers, and culture is in digital transformations, they risk failure. So I think, Barry, I might come to you first, just for some of your insight into a people first approach when it comes to digital transformation.
Sure, thanks, Rachel, and thanks, Tommy. I guess.
Sorry, Barry, you're very muffled. You might need to move your microphone.
Sorry, okay now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we've seen over the years is that there's a huge focus on the technology, but not so much focus on how that technology will embed itself into the business. And while they will set off with the intention of, engaging employees, often what happens is they engage selected employees, but not everyone from a cross section of the organization. So when you're looking at how technology will both benefit and impact the business, and that's to be managed into the business, you really have to talk to everyone. The operator on the floor knows exactly what happens on a daily basis. As you pass information on a product throughout the whole plant, they see everything. They see all the transactions, they see all the challenges. And often it's key that we bring everyone into that conversation, not just the leaders, not just the subject matter experts, but the people who are actually using the current paper processes and systems that may be there and are literally handling the product throughout the process, from when an order first comes through the door until it goes out to delivery to a client. So it's hugely important we get everyone's perspective, because often the bigger questions are asked in terms of, the science, what needs to happen, that's already there. But the logistics of when you remove one piece of paper from the plant and all the different spider's legs that touches everything in the organization, only the people actually using the paper can tell you that. It's overlooked and often comes to the table far too late, and then it can have a more negative impact on the overall program. But when you bring everyone together from the very beginning, the nuggets of information you pick up are invaluable to allow you to first of all, scope the work correctly, and then design the best solution with those people. And then when you come to actually proposing solutions, to trial those on the floor with the right people who are currently there using the system, using the processes, get them involved in the solution, because that's where you'll get the best information.
Thanks so much, Barry. And Derval, I suppose with your design thinking background and your experience in that, you probably agree that, making sure that all elements are brought in at the planning stage benefits the project as a whole. Would you like to bring anything else to this?
Oh, for sure, Rachel. Yeah, I would say, in general, in any kind of transformation, and it doesn't necessarily have to be life sciences, it's broadly applied, that the principle of, people solving their own challenges. So if employees are engaged from the start and they get to co-create the solutions to their own challenges, then it follows that those same employees will be very engaged in making the transformation work. Their fingerprints are all over the solution, if you like. So the idea that a digital transformation does not consider the impact on people, it's not going to succeed unless you take the people element into account, or indeed go that step further and have the people who are impacted by the transformation actually design the transformation, because they know best. As Barry had said earlier, that a lot of digital transformation, a lot of people equate that with technology, but there's so much more besides. It's organization culture, it's people, and it's stakeholders. I won't go into stakeholders too much here, because we will be talking about that as we go through these principles. But yeah, my point, I guess, is that engage your employees in actually designing the solution, and they will support it because they've co-created it from the word go.
Thanks, Virgil. And Ray, you come from a wealth of experience in this. Would you have an example, from the industry where you've got the experience on where this approach has worked?
Yeah, no, I have some great examples, and I was just saying, so I'm, one of the roles I have, I'm the chairman of the IMSIS, the Irish Medical Surgical Trade Association, and this is an association of companies that are delivering in diagnostics, devices, and digital. So patients and clinicians are at the heart of everything we do. So as we embark on digital transformation processes, we absolutely have to have, customers, patients first. And indeed, the industry that we're in is really regulated as well. So that, that there's an added obligation to make sure that that happens. And a particular program that I was involved in that really underlines the people first is one that I did with the HSE, Ireland's Health Service Executive. And they had a goal of doing complete digital transformation in the whole area of radiology. So I don't know if you were unfortunate enough to break your arm a number of years ago, you may remember going in and having the x-ray taken, and the x-ray going to the film department. They processed the film, it went back to the doctor, he put it up against a light board, spoke to into a dictaphone, it went to the typing pool, and a couple of days later, the report and image went to the doctor. So their vision was to completely change this, to bring in digital transformation, to digitize the images, bring in voice recognition, etc. So one of the things that struck me is how they actually put a people first approach. They involved all of the stakeholders, and this was a national system going to every hospital in the early stage of the business case. And during the design stage, I remember well, they invited representatives of 17 hospitals to come together for 3 weeks. Mater, Beaumont, all the hospitals around the country came in, and we had a design session. And as we walked through the processes and the workflows, it gave everyone an opportunity to actually say whether it was going to work or not. And it was great insight taken in that determined the path for the program. The other interesting thing was if someone put up their hand and said, there's absolutely no way this system is going to work for us in that way, you had 16 other hospitals turning around and saying, well, what are you doing today? What are you doing today? So there's an element of self-regulation. So never underestimate the power of bringing the people in the early stages. And also that community went on to ensure that the HSE's program was probably one of the most successful digital transformation programs ever. And that group are still meeting 10 years later today to chart its progress.
Mm. That's fantastic. And I suppose it's easy with any type of digital transformation to be focused on the solution, and really taking it back to the people who are most affected. Yeah. is a great approach. Tommy, would you like to add anything before we move on?
Just a thought on people, and I mentioned at the beginning skills as well. Across the piece, we work with the companies around a constant upskilling. And if we had looked in the past, we would have been looking at things like Lean Six Sigma, trying to take cost out of a process. But now more and more, that training will involve some digital element. And if we look as well at what the likes of some of the research centres are doing right now that the government has funded, the one that's closest to me, of course, is NIBRD, whereby NIBRD have been collaborating with the likes of Boston Consulting Group, with the likes of Siemens. And again, that's all around the digital and data space. But most importantly, it is a people, because at the end of the day, what we want is more digitally enabled people working in these companies. So we're constantly working on this upskilling agenda, which is to make sure they've got the skills for the next generation of products or the next generation of processes that they're going to be working with.
Great. Thank you so much, Tommy. So no questions have come through for that topic, so I will move ahead, and if you have any questions, like say, pop them in the Q&A box and I can throw them to the panelists before we move on. But the second principle for digital transformation success is treating it as a transformation. So digital transformation, you know, it's the future of a business transformation, and it's not just about implementing, you know, new technology. It truly is, you know, a transformation process. So, you know, Barry, I might start with you actually again, just in terms of the journey that a business goes through, you know, above just, like I said, implementing a new technology.
Yeah. So again, you know, transformation, what's the future going to look like in this company? And down to people again, what will my job look like in the future? Often there's a fear that digital transformation is removing jobs. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's creating a need for more skills. And Tommy's alluded to it there in terms of people being more digitally enabled. And when you look at the, you know, essentially trying to transform people from the use of paper records to electronic records, well, the paper records are managed by someone in the plant today. The electronic records need to be managed as well. They need to be secure. They need to be submitted as well to regulatory bodies and everything else that happens. So it's actually creating more opportunities for people to upskill. And because they know the business, the technology jump is actually quite small. But when you understand your business, you understand your customer, and you understand then why we're doing this. So when you take all of the elements of the business into account and you're looking at why are we actually doing this digital transformation, and you can talk about efficiencies. Reducing cost is a small part of it. It's more about adding value to your business and adding flexibility. So in those terms, you need to look at how can we, you know, define those benefits, and how we know that we're on track with those benefits. But above all, how, you know, how will our end user, in this case, patients using a medicine or using a device, how will they be impacted for this? And it goes down to things like, you know, ensuring that we're never in an out of stock situation, ensuring that because of the transparency and the visibility and the improvements in quality, that a better quality, a more predictable product will get to the client. Who is a, you know, in some cases it could be a very sick person. So if once people keep that in mind, the why we're doing it, it does tend to help with this whole transformation.
Thanks so much, Barry. And Derval, I might come to you now again next. And so in terms of, you know, the transformation process, do you have any advice on, you know, what brings success?
Yeah, I mean, the principle we're talking about here, Rachel, is business transformation. So it's not just digital. And I think for digital transformation to succeed, you need to consider the whole business ecosystem. And by that, I mean, is everything aligned with the change that the transformation is going to bring about? So specifically, what you need to consider is, are all the business departments or the units within the organization, are they all in alignment with that change? So everything from HR to IT to even down to things like how are people incentivized? You know, if their work practices have to change as a result of the digital transformation, have you got that lined up already? Have you put those processes in place? You know, not aligned, there will be, you know, challenges to actually a smooth implementation. So things like, you know, is the strategy well communicated? Have we got the incentives in? What sort of measures are we using? You know, is HR lined up? Are they aware of the changes that this is going to bring about? what sort of dashboard do you have to measure the changes that the transformation is going to bring? So it's almost like a very forensic checklist of how the transformation will impact the whole of the organization, not just implementing a piece of technology.
Thanks, Derval. That's a very important point to remember. And I suppose, Ray, if I come to you next, so as kind of an industry insight, have you got an example where, you know, the digital transformation has, you know, taken a view of the whole business and the needs, you know, kind of more than just...
Well, to be honest, I think anyone who's making a big investment in doing a digital transformation, if they're not thinking about the whole business, they're not at the races. You know, the technology typically is the easy bit, it's kind of understood, but always seems to be the one that everyone focuses on. And you know, I suppose the course that your colleagues there are going to be presenting will probably put everything in proportion. You know, a great example would be business intelligence, for example. You know, a company decided that we want to actually embark on a business intelligence solution, and an awful lot of work will go into the data models and what UI our people on the ground have to do great dashboards, etc. But actually, the true benefit of something like business intelligence is what they actually do with the insight that they get, and how they're actually going to affect change in their business based on that insight. And if you don't think about that as an example, if you don't think about that very important thing, you're going to end up having a very fancy tool sitting on a PC in your worker's office, never used. That's just one example. And
yes, I suppose the implications of the technology are so wide-reaching that you're kind of, you know, you're doing yourself a disservice by not thinking about how it benefits, you know, the business as a whole. Tommy, would you like to come in with anything before we move on?
Just a small one that, again, it's based on what Ray just said. This whole thing of digital transformation, it's, as everyone said, it's not just the machine, it's not just the technology, it is the people. But there is that balance between the two. We're obviously going to, on all of our sites around the country here, we're going to implement new technology, new software platforms, new digitally enabled platforms. But the people have to come along on this. I think Derval mentioned it as well. Have we talked about the HR angle on this? Have we brought the people with us, right? So it's a question of, as we go through a business transformation, to always have the people in mind in terms of what skills do they need going forward. Are they ready to take this on? And I even bring it back to my own team in IDA. If you think about what we're going through right now, we're all broadcasting from our own homes right now. We're not in our offices or at factory sites or whatever it might be. And for many of us, we won't be. So that's a digital transformation in itself that's ongoing for everybody. And some people take to it immediately and others don't. And we really are going to have to think about our teams of people and be sensitive. There's a certain empathy piece here that needs to come into this as well, in terms of thinking about our people and what this is doing to them, be it a digital transformation on a manufacturing site or a digital transformation just of our teams at work.
Absolutely, absolutely. There is, you know, so much more to it, as you say. A question has just come in there. I might just put it to the panel. Dan asked, can we attract new foreign direct investment by creating digitalization excellence in areas outside of manufacturing, for example, supply chain, sales management, R&D, clinical research? You know, does that make us more attractive to investment?
Well, if I could maybe just get a first fist at that one, I think the answer is absolutely yes, right? Again, as I said at the outset, if we look across all our companies and all our sites around the country, and some of the companies have multiple sites around the country, they all have some form of digital transformation going on, okay? But not just digital transformation. So if we take the transformation aside for a minute, but some of them are very well digitally enabled already, but it allows them then to add extra activities. So now we're moving beyond or outside of just manufacturing. So supply chain management, for one, comes up for big comment, where companies are building large teams in that area around managing third-party suppliers globally, not just in Ireland, but globally. We also then find it in the context of clinical trial management, where we're starting to see a number of the sites taking that on, or the companies bringing that in as an extra activity into Ireland. So there's no doubt that by upskilling and by digitally enabling our company, that we will win extra FDI from that. So it'll be related to manufacturing, yes, but also related to the products that will in the future be manufactured here.
Absolutely. And you know what, that leads us on really well to our third principle, which is the full value chain. So focusing on the end-to-end value chain and facilitating full business alignment is critical to a sustainable business transformation. You know, so I might go back to the start now again, and Barry, I'll come to you first, and if you'd like to offer some thoughts on this principle.
Yeah, well, I suppose the question was very well timed, I have to say, because it fit in well with this. And, you know, when you're looking at transforming a part of the business, you can't just look at that business. So you have to look at your suppliers. You have to look at your, you know, your multinational partners and so on within your organization, because everything from, you know, pharmaceutical serialization to continuity of supply, where people in sort of what we call the storm risk areas are looking to see how can we prevent you know, an impact to our stock on the market. We can, you know, produce the same product in a different place, a different location. But if that's on paper, that's one set of challenges. If it's electronic and all of your suppliers and your customers and your logistics people are on the same wavelength from a technology perspective, it's a much more seamless operation. It's not easy, it's still quite a challenge. But that's why when you're looking at this, you mustn't just look at one part of your plant or one part of your business. Like, where does the first trigger come from to produce a product? It comes from a need in the market. It comes from research and development. And as Tommy says, bringing all those together to make the information transparent, and so a decision can be made very easy. And then when we look at a piece of data, every step in the process will create data. What's that data used for? What's it needed for? And how can it add value to the process? So when that's all systemized or electronic, whether it's coming from your suppliers, external within your own company, or even from your patients when you're getting feedback initially, that makes the world much smaller, and it makes it a much more seamless process. But, you know, one of the big challenges that we see regularly when we're doing this with clients is that they're very polarized on a specific problem to solve within the organization, quite rightly so in many cases. And what we help to do is try and put some perspective on that. Is right, this is one problem, but, you know, the solution can be a solution for multiple challenges in the organization. And when you bring everyone together, everyone from every department in the same room to run a workshop to scope the exercise, often it's the first time, believe it or not, they've actually sat together as a team to discuss the problem and the proposed solution, and they're amazed at that themselves. You know, why have you never sat down before? You only sit over there. You know, where a HR person might not think they have to speak to a logistics person on an operational issue. A finance person might think they've no involvement in a technology solution. But when you bring everyone together, you'd be surprised at the perspective you get on everything, and how much quicker then you can get to the real requirements of the business. Okay.
Thanks, Barry. Deborah, we'll come to you. So next on the topic of the full value chain.
Yeah. For me, I think it's if you're going to implement digital transformation, it's about, do you have that clear line of sight behind you and in front of you? You know, so it's knowing your value chain very, very well indeed. But it's also about having a shared value, a shared understanding of that value chain, because as Barry has pointed out, people coming from different areas of the business will have different perspectives. And it's only when you actually bring people together to co-create, as we've talked about, that new ideas can be surfaced, that shared understanding can be developed, and imaginative and innovative, probably positive side effects or byproducts of the transformation can be called out and articulated. So I suppose for digital transformation to be successful, and the key principle here is that intimate understanding of the value chain. So a clear line of sight behind and in front of you in terms of implementing that transformation.
Thanks, Shirley. That's great. Ray, I might come to you now for again the industry insight into the full value chain.
Industry insight, I'd say it's probably more. So I've spent many years as a program manager, and I'm a real fan of this. You know, when you're standing in a boardroom and you're trying to get the board to invest significantly in a digital transformation program, you need all the ammunition that you can have to make sure that you tailor your message to the different audiences, the finance guy, the head of operations, the head of regulatory, and taking the time out to do a full value chain analysis. You know, I call it benefits mapping for me anyway, which is you know, we have certain outcomes we want to realize, and how are we going to get there? And getting a clear map or picture to achieve that is vital. And I suspect a lot of what Derval and Barry on the course will be doing is giving you the recipe book. You know, we said this is about what is the recipe for successful digital transformation. So these are key ingredients. And if you're empowered with this information, ultimately it'll enable you to, number one, get your message across. Number two, as you're delivering your program, understanding that you're still aligned with the original goal and you're still focused on the outcomes that you set off at the beginning of the journey. So yeah, no, this is for me probably one of the most important.
Thanks, Ray. Tommy, I'll come to you next. Do you have?
Yeah, I'll just be short on this one. I think it's something we talk to our clients about all the time, is the full value chain, and it's a strategy we have. I talked about already on the last topic, where we reach forward into commercial from manufacturing and we reach backwards into the clinic. Is basically what we try to do. And what we're always saying to the companies is, look, there's a lot more you can be doing here when we look at the full value chain from end to end. And then we try and explain to companies how Ireland, in that regard, and Irish people can create value for you. So we do that all the time. And as I said earlier, we're seeing more and more of that, where that message is getting home. And we see it with the multiple sites that the companies are putting in Ireland, the multiple activities they're putting in, and they have confidence that we can deliver. So as I say, to continue that confidence that we can deliver, and back to the same, it's a bit of a mantra with me. We constantly have to be open to that upskilling piece and learning new things. And maybe to give a little plug at this point for Derval and for Barry in the course, I think this is the ideal opportunity, because as I say, again, we maybe have that little bit of extra time that we can concentrate on this right now. And it definitely will help companies and create value for companies as they go forward.
Thanks very much. Just before we move on, we've gotten one more question, which I'll open up to the panel. It's, how do we ensure that the business doesn't bring in multiple digital systems that cannot communicate with each other, you know, depending on the different departments?
Yeah.
So how can we, you know, avoid that?
I suppose that's proper regulation within your business. You know, I'm sure typically you'd have the architects who would have responsibility for ensuring that our systems communicate together. And you know, it's you don't want someone implementing a solution in absence of everyone else. So it's a fundamental principle of project management. As you're building a project, you need to be aware of the adjacent projects that are happening around you. So strong governance and proper approach by an organization is probably one of the ways.
Yeah, and I think it's a leadership alignment too, Ray. You know, it's about knowing, you know, what are the strategic objectives, and what, where do you want to be with this transformation? Where do you want to achieve? Governance, absolutely, couldn't agree more. You can't have people going off implementing small solutions here and there that are not actually joined up, so to speak. But it's also, I think there can be a tendency for people to sort of say, okay, well, if I implement this piece of technology over here, I've ticked the box of digital transformation and now we can move on. And it's so much more than that. So I would agree absolutely with you that applying program management principles and having good governance are key, as they are indeed in any change or transformation projects.
Yeah, I guess it's an interesting question, because it's some challenge we see an awful lot, and I allude to two things, and we've been speaking all along about bringing the different departments together. So, you know, bringing a procurement person into this discussion early, so they understand, you know, where they need to go to make a decision if something needs to be purchased, but also by getting early prototypes tested, as you know, as early in the program as possible, and using the vendors, because the vendors are only too happy to help and contribute and work together to collaborate to give you an overall solution. I've seen insane situations where you have a multi-million-dollar system, multiple multi-million-dollar systems on a plant, and you're printing off something from one to enter information into another one, simply because there was no conversation had at the beginning, or the global procurement people didn't think they had a part in this. And it goes back to everything we've been saying, bringing all the different groups together, but above all, testing prototypes as early as you can.
And I suppose
Rachel,
go ahead.
Sorry, Richard, just very quickly. What we see as well is exactly that, as Barry has outlined. This whole thing of you need your procurement people talking to your engineering people in terms of what they're going to procure, and what are the key parameters around that procurement or that tender, to make sure it's not just cost, because sometimes that's where the misalignment can come into place. Where we've also found it too, and this is a bit of an odd one, where you find acquisitions between companies. So suddenly you've got one company's got one platform, and suddenly they get acquired by a larger company with a completely different platform. So now there's a real transformation project, all right, to try and digitally align, if I can call it that. And that's not always the easiest thing to do. I think with the more modern companies, you're seeing that there's certain platforms that proliferate. But for some of the older companies, that's a more difficult exercise, I would say, just in creating that digital alignment.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's kind of a one that you're likely to forget, but that would have a big impact in how employees and different businesses adapt to those sorts of unexpected transformations, I suppose. But that question again brings us really nicely to the fourth principle, which is plan activation, because really a transformation strategy, it's unlikely to succeed without a clear activation plan and a clear roadmap that meets all of the stakeholders' requirements. So I couldn't have planned it better that question leads us very nicely to this principle. So I might come back. I know Barry, you spoke on it just a little bit there, but I might come back to you again just to bring us back in how your strategy will help you get success. Yeah,
I guess as a project manager and as someone who helps sort of rescue projects that get into difficulties, what you'll see when you go onto a large capital program is a massive wall filled with a Gantt chart, and by the time the thing is printed, it's out of date, and people aren't really focusing on what are we trying to deliver in the next 4 weeks, what are we trying to deliver in the next 8 weeks, and so on, and how does that contribute to the overall strategy. So you'll find templates of these plans all over the place. People will put them up there and not blindly follow, but they'll follow based on what they've done before, instead of having a sensible check of saying, right, let's trigger this amount of activity in 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 8 weeks. We need to achieve this. How will we do it, and how does that contribute to the big picture? How does that contribute to the overall journey? If we do hit a bump on the road, we'll manage that, but ultimately activate that plan, get moving, and only in doing it you'll find out, are you on the right track? One question you often see out there was, when's the best time to start your digital transformation journey? Well, it was probably about 5 years ago, but the second best time is now. And move swiftly. Don't get hung up on having a 5,000 line item plan in front of you and worrying about item 3060 at this point. Let's focus on the next 4 weeks in a lot of detail, and then the next 8 weeks in a relevant amount of detail, because if you don't achieve your 4 weeks, your 8 weeks are out the window anyway. And that's the biggest thing I find is, get going as quick as you can. Be honest in moving in that direction, supporting each other together, but very much what did we achieve in the last 4 weeks that gets us towards the bigger picture. But ultimately, taking action is the way you learn. Are you on the right track or not?
Thank you. And Derval, you spoke a little bit earlier about stakeholders and you kind of pulled yourself back, but certainly, the plan, has to bring in all the requirements of the stakeholders.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, Rachel. I think it's key to transformation success is first of all, knowing who your stakeholders are. And a lot of people say, well, that's easy to do. And it's not so easy, because again, if you bring a group of people together to co-design the strategy or to co-create a transformation program, they each may have their own view on who the stakeholders are, and indeed what priority those stakeholders, in what way they should be treated or prioritized. So the very first step, I believe, is to identify the stakeholders and go and talk to them and actually capture their requirements for your transformation plan. Barry has talked about the planning piece, and I think another element of that to keep you on track, so to speak, and to activate your planning is to ensure that you're managing those stakeholder requirements at all times. So you're bringing your stakeholders along from them initially stating what their requirements for the transformation are. So for example, you're in the life sciences manufacturing field, the above site stakeholder, in other words, headquarters may have a set of requirements for your transformation. On-site management will have, efficient production in mind and all of the benefits of digital transformation. But there are other stakeholders too, like regulators. In the case of life sciences in Ireland, it could indeed be the IDA, Tommy, and also the people who are affected by the transformation itself. So people working in the plant, on the process of manufacturing, these are all to be considered. So while you're planning and you're managing your plan, a way to ensure that you're keeping on track is to check in very regularly with, are we meeting each of those sets of stakeholder requirements? And there are a number of easy ways to put that sort of activation management in place, but it ensures that you've got continued support from your stakeholders, and that by the end of the transformation, you can actually say, yeah, we've actually met all of the original requirements and we have delivered that transformation value.
Absolutely. And Ray, I think your project management background, a good plan would be something that you would be definitely in favor of.
Yeah, I was laughing at that, because I'm a massive fan of Prince 2 and PMP and all of the recipe book for how to, digital transformation. Ain't going to work unless you have a plan. But a plan, maybe not necessarily just a Gantt chart. It's, it's a plan about, how am I going to manage communications? How am I going to deal with risk? How are we going to get quality, cost, scope? All of those essential elements of project management are critical. You need to get someone who's experienced. Better still get someone who's failed, because they have learned so much and they can bring so much to the party on this. And oftentimes digital transformation programs can be very long. So don't be afraid about mixing the team up and taking people out after a certain amount of time, because it brings more energy into some of the things that I've been thinking of. But yes, the tactical delivery of what you want to achieve is critical, and it can all fail. You want your go lives to be the quietest, most boring days possible, because you have it all sorted. You've done it all,
Yeah.
And Tommy, the IDA was mentioned there as, a potential stakeholder that might be overlooked. Would you say that that is something that you encounter, that, perhaps there are stakeholders that people don't maybe consider as important?
It can happen. And I suppose the biggest stakeholder in all of this is not so much the IDA necessarily, but in the case of biopharma, the ultimate patient. And it's amazing how, because the companies and the community are in the main commercial companies, the bottom line is productivity, cost, profit. But ultimately, the product either is a therapy for a patient or is a cure for a patient's illness. And we often have to come back to that piece and see where it fits. The way we do it sometimes with the companies, though, and I have to bring it back to a business context, is we try and challenge our companies to do that little bit more. So I think it was Ray mentioned the word scope. We talk about scope, we talk about scale, we talk about, in the broad sense, is this enough? So what we try and do is challenge our companies to think deeper, and could they not be doing more in the context always of getting a life-saving product to a patient. And I say, back from the stakeholder point of view, that has to be kept in mind.
Absolutely, it's more than just targets on a Gantt chart, yeah, absolutely. So we just have a question, well, actually a comment from Simon. We find the most successful projects we deliver within the pharma industry occur with a clearly defined user requirement statement. And without the customer knowing what they want, then you're starting on the wrong foot. So I think, Tommy, that's actually very true of your point as well, that, you have to remember the customer's needs above all, and sometimes even putting some time into clearly establishing that and can really help refine, you know, the scope of your plan before you ever, you know, set out, I suppose.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and should definitely be top of the order in terms of why are we doing this? You know, why are we doing this at all in the first place?
Yeah, and to echo that, like oftentimes, if you think about some healthcare IT projects, get the patients involved at the early stage, and ultimately try and see what it is. Or in manufacturing, it's what maybe the people you're supplying your goods to, get them involved in the early stage to sanity check that what you think is a great idea actually is.
Well, what we're finding now with clinical trials, and we're seeing more and more of this, if we think about medicines first, but we can also do it for devices, where it go through a clinical trial process and it's approved and it's out in the marketplace. But if it's actually clinical trial 4, when it's actually out in the marketplace, how does the user feel about it? What's the response? And Ray, that can be very specifically devices. How easy is it for me to use my injector pen? You know, how well does my orthopedic knee work? You know, these type of things are really, really important because that's why they were made in the first place.
Yes. Yeah.
Just simply.
Yeah, and actually also, as I think about it here, the loop back, you know, when the program is finished, you don't all head off, you know, it's still very much coming back and validating constantly that you've
Richard, just an example. We have some companies right now who are not only manufacturing devices, but manufacturing digitally enabled devices. So I'm sure you've all read different articles on this, but particularly in the respiratory space or the inhalation space, we have a couple of very good companies. And what they're doing is manufacturing the next generation of devices along with the drugs. So doing both.
Yeah.
But in that regard, they're digitally enabled. So they're able to communicate back to the doctor to say you took your dosage at the right time, right?
Yeah.
They're able to communicate back to the physician or to communicate back to the manufacturer. And in effect, they could be able to communicate back to the regulator in terms of the product and how it's performing in real time in the marketplace. So that's where we're going with these things. So this idea of digital enablement is very much the way forward. We're seeing it as well in clinical trials now, because as we saw through the COVID case, many clinical trials were either postponed or cancelled. But many are doing these remote clinical trials, and many of them using wearable devices. So exactly the same thing again. People need to know how to use them, number one, but secondly, much, much more digital enablement. And you're going to see that digital clinical trial in the future. We even see it now in terms of if you're trying to get an approval through the European Medicines Agency or the FDA, more and more of what you will give is digitally enabled files. You won't be sending a big dossier across to the FDA for them to read. That's for, and less will they want to see it. They will want companies that are able to do this.
Absolutely. And I think that kind of feedback loop and the data and being able to you know, get this real-time data feedback in feeds nicely into our 5th principle for success, which is incremental over radical. And using this agile approach and achieving transformation through rapid incremental steps rather than taking this big bang, shove it out into the world, like Ray said, you know, let's see how it goes, really, you know, helps achieve this success. So I might come back again to start to Barry and ask you to give us your thoughts on the incremental, you know, transformation over radical drastic change.
Yeah, sure. I mean, when you look at, you know, going back to the why you're doing digital transformation in the first instance, everyone would love to sort of flick a switch and have a whole plant and operation digitally transformed, but it doesn't happen like that. There's no kind of quick solution. There's no simple solution. It has to work for the business. It has to work for that plant locally and the people locally. So if you take a big challenge that's out there in the industry at the moment, and one of the regulators are keeping a close eye on, is integrity of data. So if they can't guarantee the integrity of the data surrounding how the product is manufactured, you know, it's cast out on the product. And for that reason, they'll focus on that area. So when you look at, you know, having a piece of paper, what does that, paper's biggest problem is its flexibility, okay? And you might look at how can we get the biggest bang for buck here without shutting the plant down? So if you take something like, you know, whether it's equipment logbooks or simple checklists, that we can say, right, let's just replace all checklists with an electronic equivalent first. Let's take an equipment maintenance logbook and let's make that electronic first. And that way you're bringing the technology in slowly, you're proving a concept, you're bringing the people on board slowly, you're, you know, increasing the electronic footprint and removing paper, but you're getting a big benefit in terms of data integrity, because if someone signed their name on a piece of paper or ticking a box is one thing, and that paper will travel around and has to be managed. Whereas someone, you know, signs in digitally and ticks something, that goes on electronic permanent record and it's there forever. And it immediately removes about 50% of the problems immediately. And then you can start to look at the process. Once you have the electronic record, it forces you to look at the process for making efficiencies, because it's more transparent. You can see the timestamps, you can see who did it, when and why. And you can bring it in slowly, but where people and plants have tried to just the one big bang fully electronic, it's always stalled, and they've had to revert back. Well, let's go a little bit slower. And it's the same, you know, if you try and go and use your sat nav to go from Wexford to Donegal, you know you're going to Donegal, you don't know every road you're going to take, and if you do hit a problem along the way, the sat nav kind of guide you around it. It's a little bit like that. You're taking feedback all the time, and you're not afraid to stand back and say, listen, the last 4 weeks didn't go so well, we need to adjust here. And the words agile are thrown out there, and one of the worst things about when you talk about agile project and program management, the terminology tends to drive people nuts, and particularly in life sciences, people weren't taking it seriously. They thought it was all kind of skateboardy software guys in California using that, you know, but the principles are actually quite sound, and if they're applied without the jargon, the value and the benefits are really clear. So I go back to talking about the 5,000 line Gantt charts, my worst kind of nightmare when I see it on a project. But if you have a clear roadmap and you can, you know, make these small incremental changes and measure the improvements, measure where you are at the beginning, and did we really make a change? Have we really improved quality? Have we really changed the time here and reduced time and so on, and made this more efficient? Are we getting the value? That's what the real agile is for me, you know, as opposed to terminology.
Thanks, Barry. Derval, I might come to you now as well about you know, achieving the success through incremental change.
Yeah, and again, Barry has been illustrating very life sciences specific examples there. And I actually, again, would apply just more general thinking, and that is that it's about failing fast and moving on. And so, yes, there is a tendency, I guess, to think of agile as being, you know, very software related, but it can be applied in order to make organizations more dynamic. And I think in the future, life sciences in particular will be required to be very flexible and be able to pivot and be dynamic and respond to changes. We've just seen, obviously, what's been going on in the current COVID environment, and the change that I suppose a lot of us never thought could happen is actually happening. But to build that into an organization's DNA, to embed it in the company culture, you know, that idea that we are agile, we're flexible, we can respond to market factors, environmental factors, or indeed bring in constant innovation into our ways of working. So it's, I suppose, changing the culture by being responsive and being willing to experiment, and knowing that not all of those experiments will work, but noting them and moving on. And I'm sure, Ray, you have some examples from having worked that way with a large multinational, you know, that the way that you've learned to become so much more agile, certainly in recent times.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, if we look at what it's saying, incremental over radical, I agree with you. And sometimes it depends as well on the program of the project that you're doing, but definitely seeking success, so low hanging fruit is great, because it creates success for the project, and success breeds success. Equally though, I'd also say that we have to create cultures in businesses, if we want to encourage innovation, to be supportive, to recognize that sometimes things might fail. And people, in all earnest, have actually gone and tried to create something, but it just wasn't right. And they learn from that and they move on.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, if I look to the IMSTA and I look to all the companies who are part of our association, the last number of months in COVID have been very, very busy for a lot of them. The need to adapt to make our products available quickly. You know, we've seen great advances in digital healthcare IT, in telecommunications, in the ability to, you know, almost overnight put up 50 test centers and put in place the digital IT to support that. You know, when push comes to shove, stuff can happen. We need to bottle that up as we go forward and find a way of identifying the short-term wins that we can do today that's going to propel us forward.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ray. And Tommy, just that might come to you there before we move on, you know, the importance of small change over big. I suppose the big change like COVID, that will happen to us anyway. So.
Well, we usually start with the big picture, as I think I talked about before, and trying to broaden the scope of things. But then once we do that with the client and we're there to support them, we look at milestones, just very simply. You know, what are you going to achieve and when are you going to achieve it? We do, back to the ideas earlier, put dates and times and measurability around things. And that can be an R&D project, can be a manufacturing project, or it could be an upskilling or training transformation project. In all cases, you have to be able to see what the end result will be. You may not get there overnight, as we talked about incremental, and absolutely it's incremental, but we do it by way of milestones. So if we're asking someone, what are you going to do? And they say X, we'll say, well, what are the steps in getting there? Just very clearly. And if we get to halfway through the program, where do you expect to be? So is that in terms of productivity? Is it in terms of cost containment? Is it in terms of bringing new products to market? In all that context, unless we're, again, back to this idea of challenging each other back and forth about what can be achieved, we won't get there. So bigger picture, and then the incremental steps or milestones to get there.
Absolutely. And I think then as well, a lot of these digital transformations give you access to data, you know, maybe faster and more insightful information, and you retain then the ability to implement your learnings from this new information as you go, instead of, you know, being all in and maybe finding something out that you hadn't accounted for.
Absolutely. And that's the other piece. I won't use the word agile because I wouldn't really understand it anyhow. But the idea of flexibility, you know, you set out a plan for 3 years, let's say, but that plan of course can change, and there has to be an openness to that. We talked earlier about digital transformation in the context of that new piece of kit if you do need to buy it in, but within 6 months it might be out of date. So it's a question of when's the right time to actually make that investment, and it may not be right now. It might be understanding where the industry is going and looking ahead on that digital transformation to see where you want to get to, and what investment you need to make in that process.
Just add, I think one of the most important things as we move forward, like digital transformation in the new world is going to be critical. If companies are not looking about how they can best utilize that, now they're missing a trick. And probably, you know, the things that Derval and Barry are doing around the course are great enablers to propel you in actually making that happen.
Yeah, Rachel, if you look at life sciences in general, it's been a very conservative industry because it's so highly regulated. And we haven't really talked about the regulation piece that much. And I think it really is important because it drives so much of what companies do or don't do, for that matter. And until now, they've always taken a view, oh, no, I wouldn't do that. It will cause me trouble. But the level of digital transformation and change happening right now is huge, right? As we move through into new science as well. And I think the companies are coming forward with that. We would have seen all the tech companies do this many years ago, whereas the life sciences companies have been slower to the picture, but they're picking it up pretty quickly now.
And actually, a question has come in, and it's from Simon again, to say, do you have any recommendations for navigating and speeding up the compliance process when implementing projects, specifically GDPR and GXP, etc.? This seems to be the main stumbling block in the pharma industry when it comes to change.
This kind of comes up regularly, and I'd say it's probably the first question that's asked. If we're running a scoping workshop with a client around this, the first question is asked. First of all, you can't fast track it. There's no magic here. But you have to build it in. So the first question I throw back to the person asked that are the regulatory affairs people for your company in the room here? And most often they're not. So from day one, your regulatory affairs people are involved in everything you're doing. And every change you're making, because they will ultimately have to make a submission to the regulatory bodies to inform the regulatory bodies of a major change in how we're going to manufacture. And when you're digitally transforming, it is a major change. So, you know, if compliance shouldn't come as a surprise towards the end, it should be built in from the beginning. And the only way you do that, you get your reg affairs, you get your quality and your validation people with as much a say as your manufacturing people and your technology people. And it goes back to the very first thing we said about bringing everyone together. So they will, once they're on board, they will guide you. You know, they may even have to go back to the regulators and say, listen, we're used to doing this. Can we do this, and will we still be compliant? The regulators are only too happy to engage as well and to view what you're doing and advise what you're doing well in advance of it becoming tangible. So again, bringing them on board as early as possible. I can't stress it enough, and making sure they're informed of everything you're doing and have a say in it.
Okay. Thanks so much. So we've actually covered all 5 principles now, and that was absolutely fantastic discussion. So thanks very much, and thanks for the examples as well. It's nice to get the kind of the sight into, you know, the real life implications of the things that we're discussing. If anyone has any more questions, please feel free to throw them into the chat, and I do have a couple myself, which I might throw to the panel. I suppose I would ask, you know, what does the future look like? It's been touched upon, but I suppose for the biopharma and the life sciences manufacturing sector within Ireland, you know, what does it look like, and what does the community in Ireland need to do now to, you know, move ahead?
Well, I'll start. I'd be interested actually to hear what the likes of Ray and Barry and Derval have to say on this one too. But just in a broad sense, first of all, it's been very successful. I think we need to start there. And there's a big thank you goes out to all the companies and the people working in those companies today and the success they've made for Ireland in the space. So as I said at the outset, somewhere between 65, 70,000 people directly employed on a day-to-day basis in very good, challenging jobs, right? So it's really good for the economy, exporting large amounts of product around the world. If we look most recently at the productivity numbers and the export numbers, Ireland was the only EU nation during this period, the COVID period, to see exports increase. Just think about it. We really have continued to support the Irish economy during a really difficult time. So then if we look forward and what's happening next, yes, digital transformation for sure. But if we look at the science of that, we're seeing that move into this area of cell and gene therapy or personalized medicine. And that's going to be a big part of the future. And that's going to involve more data, not less data. That's for sure. And more overall control. If we take some of these new personalized medicines that are personal just to you. So we take cells from you, Rachel, and we give you back your cells when we've re-engineered them. And there's a whole logistical nightmare in there, as I would call it, but also a logistical challenge that involves data and tracking and control and all of those pieces around it, not to mention the clinical trials that went on beforehand. I do think that Ireland has a great opportunity here because we've proven it in biologics already. We can do this. We have a lot of the skills. We even have some of those training institutions in place, like the likes of NIBRD, who will support the upskilling of these folks. And we already have, you know, the likes of RCSI saying we're ready to put more courses on in this space. So I think it's positive for the future. I think there's great opportunity here, and we think we just have to grasp it. That's what I would say.
Yeah, well, I want to give a shout out to all the business continuity project managers who were called upon in the last couple of months. Like Change Healthcare has 14,000 staff around the world. Who would have thought everyone would be working from their son's bedroom? But you know, what's changed? All of the things we thought we could never do, we can deliver cardiology systems remotely without anyone being on site. And radiology systems, we can train. We're all having in the digital health tech and medical device industry, we have to figure out how we can actually deliver without physically being there and to be safe. So I think that's the way in which delivery happens is changing. You know, if COVID goes tomorrow, there's some of the things we won't roll back on because they've been so successful. I don't know if any of you find, but I'm finding, you know, if I went to a meeting in the past, it'd take me 2 days to get there, sit down for an hour, they may not turn up. Now I go on Zoom and everyone turns up, so it's great. I I think, yeah, the digital space is going to be is critical, and the way in which we right size ourselves going forward is going to be very important.
Derval or Barry, would you like to speak to that question before we move on?
To be honest, I think we've had sort of representation, or we've had the views from the biopharma side of life sciences and now from medical devices, and I'm not sure I can add much to that, because Barry and I are probably more at the ground of digital transformation and working on projects. Myself from an organization point of view, Barry from an implementation point of view. So yeah, I mean, we're just seeing a huge increase in the business demand for this type of transformation. We're also seeing projects and programs that are in flight and seeing how they can succeed or fail, and hopefully help organizations to, in the future, implement more successfully and ensure a greater chance of success. But for sure, whatever the business driver is, there's an increasing need for digital transformation, and particularly, as I say, in the life sciences area.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, you know, digital transformation is upon us. And you know, what really gets, whether we like it or not, you know, there are changes coming, and what gets success and the principles, you know, that I won't say guarantee, but, you know, try to help us get to a successful transformation is readiness. And, you know, it was mentioned a few times there today, Tangent is keen to support, you know, the Irish industry in, you know, moving with the times and upskilling. As Tommy said, you know, there is a demand there for these skills, and we want to equip people with that. So I did mention earlier, and I'll put a link for more information now, we do have a course coming on in the next few weeks. It starts on the 1st of October, and it runs for an evening a week for 11 weeks. And it's all about equipping, you know, leaders and teams to be ready to adapt to these changes, and the rule book on, you know, how best to bring them about and adapt the processes and the practices that you already do as required and as the business needs change. And we want to provide these organizations specifically, you know, tailored solutions for life sciences manufacturing. But they're key principles for any sort of business transformation. And we want to give you this foundation for resilience and agility, though, you know, I don't want to throw around that word too much, especially, you know, in the world it's so uncertain as it is. So if you do want to find out more information about that, Barry and Derval are going to be running that program, and it will be very, you know, very, very useful for anyone who is involved in the industry now. So we'll pop the link in there, and you can go and you can register interest. And we hopefully have an information session in the middle of September as well, where you can find out more. Thanks so much to our panelists today. I hope all our attendees got a lot from that. And thanks very much for the questions and for the engagement throughout. That's been fantastic. So thanks very much. We've gone slightly over time, so I apologize to anyone who we've kept, but I didn't want to cut anyone off, so that was really interesting. So thanks very much, and hopefully we'll speak to you all soon.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.